This is Granules of Grief with Refiloe, a podcast breaking down into digestible pieces the big lump that is grief. For those still struggling with its enormity, those unfamiliar, and even those who found a version of living that is somewhat closer to the aliveness they had before the loss. Thank you for being here. I'm speaking today with Mufaro, simply Mufaro. I love it. He said, just call me Mufaro. It's a global brand. And so that's all I'm going to say about my guest today, outside of thanking you, Mufaro, for making the time.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if there's anything you want to say about yourself at all in the introduction. Okay.
So I'm a professional griever. I'm actually... I'm an engineer by profession. I've worked in mining pretty much my whole life. And I'm from Zimbabwe. That's where I was born and bred, but currently I'm based in South Africa. I'm married with 2 daughters, 2 young adults who give me gray hairs. I came originally with a family of 4 siblings and mom and dad. But now it's 3 of us left, my mom and my sister.
Well, thank you so much. You've already mentioned you had 3 siblings.
Yeah.
You now only have 1. An entry point really into our discussion today.
So I lost my father when I was 27 to cancer. He was 54. So I panic a lot about me being 50, 51. And I feel I'm very young, and yet I thought my father was old. So he died of colon cancer. He went to hospital once in his life and never came back. And then I lost my brother who came after me at the age of 37 in a car accident in Zimbabwe. Then a few years later, I lost the one who came after him to suicide at 37 as well. So there was a time when my sister turned 37. I remember I called every day. She's based in the UK. Who called every day just to check that she was still alive. I've struggled with dealing with it because it's cumulative more than it is specific. You know, when you feel shortchanged by life.
I know that feeling.
My brothers were the closest people I ever had in my life. You know, we grew up in a family where your friends were your brothers. So I could technically say I have no friends.
A very, very heavy start. And I just want to take this moment to just take all that in and to say that, you know, this is exactly what grief is. It's something that comes in waves, and you never know when you'll be overcome, and you never know when you will manage. I really wish you were joking. I mean, we joked so nicely in the beginning, and I love your energy. And I wish you were joking when you say that you called your sister many times. Grief is so weird, right? Like it really turns you into someone you never thought you would meet in yourself. This person who will call someone. I mean, you can never ever imagine where grief will place you, but that resonates with me so deeply. Maybe may not resonate to someone who hasn't walked that journey, who doesn't know the anxiety, who doesn't know the kind of meaning that you can sometimes attach to things that to other people probably wouldn't make sense. I try not to talk about myself in these episodes, so that's all I'll say, that it really resonates, and I appreciate your willingness to keep going. And I am so sorry that this has been your experience. Just to touch on when you said that you feel like you have no friends, and say that grief can come with a bout of loneliness. That I understand fully well when you say that your brothers were your friends.
It's not like I have no friends. I think if my friends hear me say I have no friends, they'll probably want to kill me. It's like there's a closeness that you develop with your brother. I think not being judged. It's the vulnerability that I've been able to share with my brothers was I've not yet been able to deal with that. I mean, there's some friends who are very close, but it's not quite there.
I think part of the grief, when you grieve these family members like that, is that you're losing your safe spaces, right? You're losing your safest spaces. In a world where, the space to be vulnerable is shrinking, and here you are losing one of your closest confidants, one of the people where you can just be fully you. One of the objectives of the podcast is to create the space where you can just talk about the people you lost. And so tell me a bit about your dad and your two brothers who you call your friends.
My dad was a teacher, very intelligent man during colonial times, so very sharp mind, He taught me mathematics, and he was a headmaster. At the time of his death, he ran the biggest schools in Zimbabwe. He came from nothing, pretty much. So for him to go to school, he actually joined a seminary to become a Roman Catholic priest. And that's how he did his high school. I always joke with my mom and say that, it's your fault that my dad is not a priest. So, I mean, my father is just a normal life, strong guy, did everything, tried his best to give us the best education. I remember going home one day and found my father in bed. He couldn't get out of bed on a Saturday morning. He said he was feeling constipated and whatever. Saying, why don't you go to see a doctor? He wouldn't want to go to see a doctor until we forced him to go see a doctor. He gets there, he was told it's cancer. Wow. They tried to operate. When they called in, they said, no, it's too late. Stage 4, it's gone everywhere. 6 months later, he looked like he was getting better with a bit of radiotherapy and stuff like that. And he died. It was that quick. I'd gone away for training where the job I was at the time. I had wanted to be with him at his last hour, so I told people to call me if things got worse. And he told them not to call me until the day he died. So I never had that, that last conversation but we had many conversations because we knew he was going. And he had, how people distribute their clothes and stuff like that when they die. My dad did that up front. So by the time he actually died, all his good clothes, all his nice suits, particularly my brother who was a lawyer, and all the suits, they were rough and ready. I just took shoes. One of the biggest things I've got, the gripes I've got is that my dad would have understood my life better than my mom. And I would have wanted him to be able to experience what I can make them experience now. I paid for my mom to go on a holiday in Europe. The pain was that if she had gone with my dad, the experience would have probably been 20 times better. My mother was a brilliant support to him. She has kids. She has survived not having a husband for nearly 30 years now. She's kept his memory going for that long. So, she's a brilliant woman. She was also a teacher. And to make it worse, she has then had to endure the loss of 2 sons, tragically at 37. My brother who came after me came to my house for my 40th birthday. He had just moved back from Europe, where he had been for 10 years, and moved back to Africa, where he started a business in Zim. He was setting up something in Botswana, and things were going very well. So I remember when I turned 40, we had a big 40th birthday, and I remember I stood up and told everyone how much I loved my brother.
Wow.
And how close he was. So I remember telling my mom that you have 4 children, but I love this one the most. The others were not there at my parties. The others at the time were all based in the UK, so they couldn't make the party. So we were very close, extremely close. One of the pains is that, for example, when I do well, I have no one to tell. So he was a lawyer, and so he just died from a car accident. He was hit by a car at 11 o'clock in the morning. My second brother was called Shingirirai. He was born in the middle of the war in Zimbabwe. So the name is derived from pretty much with the War of Liberation. Shingirirai just means, be brave.
Shingarai.
And Mfumo means spears. He was born in the middle of the war, so we lived out in the rural areas, so we actually saw it firsthand. Ended up actually having to go to boarding school at the age of 8. A terrible boarding school at that. I won't say his name because I hate that school. Maybe those who went to the school will kill me for So Shingi was a software engineer in the UK. It studied in the States and he had this condition called psychosis. I'm not a medical practitioner. I have the same condition. I think it comes on, so when it's severe, I think this treatment has got some steroidal aspect to it. When I had it, I was, the doctor didn't treat me for as long as possible so that I wouldn't say, you could get psychotic. He called me and says, no, look, this thing is affecting my skin and whatever. I was like, I'm having this problem that my doctor thinks is the same thing. How could we have the same problem? We chatted a bit. The steroids then got him quite psychotic. But he didn't tell me. So that December, we hardly spoke. But we used to call him Father Christmas because he used to look after all our kids. He always said, no, don't buy your kids presents. That's my job. So he would buy all the kids presents because he did have children. So he would buy my kids, my other brother's kids, my sister's kids. He would buy everybody presents. He would look after the kids. So he'd call the kids in November, so what you want, what. So he would have all this thing with the kids by himself. So he was called Father Christmas. And so that December, he kind of spoke to the kids. He just did whatever he did. Then I think he didn't buy presents. He just said to me, look, just get what the kids need. Just send me the bill. But then this thing affected him so badly. The steroids, I think it's to suppress you, then caused a bit of psychosis in him. Then caused him to lash out at work and do all sorts of, Then in doing that, I think he ended up losing his job. We didn't know at the time he pretended to still be working. And anyway, the reality, I think the psychosis just got worse. I think he was not being looked after properly. I'm not sure what the detail is on that, around that. But what I know is that he pretty much lost his mind. Then I remember when one Friday afternoon, I think it was on Valentine's Day or the day after Valentine's Day, I'd gone for drinks with my wife, just hang out on Friday, just chat. And when we sat down, I got a message from my sister-in-law. She can't find it. I then immediately asked my wife for us to go home. She said, why? I said, no, something bad has happened. She said, no, but she said she can't find him. She didn't say he's dead. She said, no, he has died, I know. I can feel it in my spirit. So I came home and then I called my uncle to go and find my mother because I'm sure the news I'll get in the next few hours is not going to be good. And for sure within the next 2 or 3 hours, we then established that his car had been found at the train station. The next thing was, I think police work that could be seen on CCTV footage walking onto the train tracks and beside. 2 weeks later, flying to the UK to get his remains. I then had to make the difficult decision in our culture of cremating him while I was in the UK. And then pretty much put him in a little box, put him in a paper rucksack, and boarded a plane and gone to Zimbabwe to bury his ashes. So it was quite traumatic from that position. I mean, look, we can talk about this for a long time because, I mean, I felt, when you've got, sitting with a bag in front of you in a plane,
yes,
and you know your brother is there.
Yes.
It's traumatic, I think, to say the least. I didn't realize how much it would affect me.
It is clearly still so difficult for you. I cannot imagine what that experience of going to the UK to bring your brother home in that condition, and that it is not a practice that I'm speechless, and I feel like my words would be futile. What a heavy, heavy, heavy thing it has been.
So when Shingi died by suicide, the note that he left implied that there was a feeling from his side that he was shortchanged, I think, from his work. And I think what goes through one's mind sometimes is that you're trying to make things better, yet it makes things a whole lot worse. I think you're solving a problem by creating a problem. One, the drug regime that he was on, I had been counseled on it because I was expecting that I may end up on the same drug, because I was at the time when this happened actually going through a round of psychodosis myself. So I was actually very skinny. It was making me lose weight. I wasn't eating and affecting my lungs. So I was having trouble breathing and so on.
Oh my God. When you say often with a person who's feeling suicidal, there is the feeling that this is the best thing to do. But I think for those who are still alive and those who experience suicidal thoughts and even behaviors, it's an important reminder that it's far from the truth that suicide is a solution to anything. It actually causes more problems that may be difficult to see at the moment of thinking of dying by suicide. But the best thing to do at a time like that is probably reach out to the nearest accessible and affordable resources to you. Tell someone who can help you. Go to a center where you can get help. You can be helped out of that suicidal episode. And I think that didn't happen with Shingi. And you also mentioned that he didn't have support. And I just wanted to say, do you feel that he didn't have support in terms of the kind of counseling support you mentioned for being put on that drug regimen?
It's like when you get support, but then maybe it's not sufficient. My view was that it could have been deficient. I don't think there was enough to even, I suppose, educate those around him, including maybe his workplace, as to what he was going through. For example, I would want to believe that they would have taken a different course of action if they fully understood where he was at. But I spoke to some of his colleagues when I went up to the UK, but I suppose I didn't have the strength to fight because it wasn't going to bring him back.
The experience of losing your brother in that way, how did it affect your grief journey?
My biggest fear is that my children will start looking at these things and say, well, our uncle died this way, so you're so close to them. Sometimes I worry when I have to sit them down, and try to, just make sure that they don't think that this is a solution. Because it then becomes moves from generation to generation, but that's the biggest fear. It's scary for me just to think about it. I'm no statistician, but I would want to believe that there's a greater likelihood of people dying that way if one member of the family or community dies like that. It is a compounded effect on that society or family, because it becomes a way out of difficult situations.
Both you and I are not medical or even mental health professionals, but I think that there is research around it. And I think that there is an increased likelihood with one person dying by suicide, which is why I think the advice is always for the people who are left behind to take greater care of their own mental health. I think even in the absence of a suicide death in the family, it is important to keep checking on the mental health of our children and of other family members. I just think that it becomes greater in a family where something like this has happened. And I'm just really, really sorry. I do hope that this nudges somebody who has had similar experiences in the right direction in terms of finding the right resources. And I want to thank you for sharing.
It's always a difficult thing to share, but I think if there's anything, that's the one thing I'm always willing to talk about, because Well, because of the stigma around death by suicide in our societies and the need for people to look after their mental health. And for instance, when my kids struggle with things like that, I'm much more willing and quicker to suggest counseling and stuff like that.
Yes.
Because I'm mindful of how quickly one moves from being okay to not okay at all, that sort of thing.
Yeah, like that mention of counseling and the destigmatization really of seeking mental health support. He spoke so candidly. And some of the things you said are actually being said for the first time. No one has ever come on this podcast and said, it's sad that I can do this for the person I've lost and they're not here to experience it. I get that fully. And you'd also talked about having no one to call when you've got good news, the loneliness of grief that I know so well. And I think people who've been significantly hit by grief will know, just wishing you could pick up the phone and knowing you cannot. And so thank you for touching on those things. What surprised you about grief?
For me, grief has been cumulative. My grief is compounded in that I don't grieve them individually. I have a compounded sense of loss, of losing all the men in my family. The worst part is then to see the 3 male members of my family.
Yes.
Lined up, graves next to each other. And I suppose I feel it, like, for example, when I had family gatherings and, all the cousins come and, you invariably you'll have your little caucus of your immediate family, like every big family gathering, no one to caucus with. So the loss comes in when you find you're alone. Losing him was probably, it just pushed me over the edge in terms of, I had accepted that too, my father and my brother said, look, in our language we say these things happen to people, not dogs.
Yes, we do too.
The meaning of that being that, you can't wish this on another person. That was a person, you're a person. So you take it, loss. I mean, I think they say that you can only lose when you love. So the only way you can avoid grief is to avoid love.
Is to avoid love. In the deepest throes of grief, sometimes the option of not loving seems very attractive. The option of not loving anybody because the pain is so great. As you have also said in our side conversations about how, there are points when you think you'll never laugh again.
Exactly. Yeah. When my brother died, I was sure in my heart, never again will I laugh. Never again will I be happy. And then, you find a few months later you're laughing and you're actually laughing genuinely.
Yes. Yeah. Are there moments that continue to be challenging?
My uncles that I call my young brothers. One of them had a wedding probably about 10 years ago. So we went up to Bulawayo to his wedding. And then I think the day after the wedding, we're sitting at his house and the whole family, the extended family was there, the immediate family, his brothers, and some of my cousins. So quite a large group of people there. So I was about to drive back to South Africa and asked me to speak to the family. But then in trying to recount that it was the anniversary of my father's death, he had by then been dead for maybe 18 years or something. I broke down completely so badly that I couldn't even drive. My wife had to drive us back. It was completely uncontrollable because I never mourned my father. Remember I said earlier at the beginning, when my father died, I just accepted that he died. I moved on. I just did what I had to do and moved on. But I'd never, at that point, looking at his brothers, I could see how similar they were to him, but I could see that I don't have a father. These guys are there, in our culture, they are my fathers. But these guys are not my fathers. Where do I look to? No way. I felt so alone, so
where do I look to?
shattered. And I never actually, I think I spoke for 2 minutes
Mm.
and then just couldn't. I suppose for me, the challenge for an African man when they lose is when you become vulnerable to pain like the way I am now. I'm very delicate in many ways. So I feel weak because I don't have the strength anymore to be strong. You know, I always say, you know, my mom is 77. Heaven forbid, let me not lose her now. My daughter was involved in a car accident about 2 weeks ago. I said to myself, if I had lost her, but then I look at my mom. She has lost 2 sons. She's still the woman that leads other women singing at the funeral. She led people in my brother's funerals. I wish I had her strength.
The compounding grief is something that I'm still trying to reconcile. It feels like you are doing all the mourning you refused to do at certain points in your life, or all the mourning you didn't know how to do. I appreciate your mention of that so much, saying, I just moved on after my dad passed. And then one day I realized, Mufaro, you're going to have to face the fact that you lost your dad. You're going to have to face the fact that you're left with people who are not your dad. And I think my grief has been very similar. And so I'm listening to you. And this is becoming an episode where I'm also forced to look inward. Most of them are, but in so many ways in this episode, you're forcing me to look also into my own life. You mentioned something in our side conversation, how you cry more after these deaths, just like you were talking to me and about me. And yeah, I think it's sort of accumulated grief. I will cry at anything. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I encourage you to keep crying. I cry.
It's hard for a man.
I know.
When you become the weepy one.
I know.
Last year we lost my wife's brother, surgically stabbed. So because of I'm weepy and whatever, I struggled to give my wife support that she needed. Because because I'm in the state that I had to go and look at him in. I had to tell her, you can't, let me do it. Because although it was killing me, but I wish I would have done it better in terms of, but I don't have the strength anymore to do something like that better. So it's, I think, the vulnerability that it gives, I suppose, for a guy, and for men, the way I was raised and the way I grew up, I was raised to be strong. I'm a big guy, and normally I'm actually very strong in my presence and my demeanor and the way I do business.
Yes.
But then, so when you take away strength from me, it's like a limb is chopped off.
Yes.
I don't know how else to operate. Just know that I operate from strength. Strength, I'm better in strength than I am in vulnerability. So when you become vulnerable to the point of weeping, and weeping comes so easily, it's confusing. How can I cry in front of a woman? Seriously? Yeah, because I'm not that weepy.
Part of part of what we're doing here is changing that masculinity narrative. Mufaro, men struggle with grief, and so I'm very happy that you are here as an African man, and that you're being so open about your experience. And in terms of giving support, I understand what you mean. People think that if you've gone through more experiences with death, you become better at giving support. I don't know that has been my experience.
So let me put it this way. We are better at it insofar as you understand it better.
What to you should people not say or not do when somebody is grieving?
I don't give empty words, empty promises, where people would say, just call me, whatever you need.
Yes.
That's just not
true.
Thank you
so much. Yes.
If I call you that I need 200,000 rand, They're going to say nothing. So, I mean, so leave me alone. You know, grief is expensive. You know, if I call you that I could give, sometimes you need the craziest things, some of the things that you may need, not even repeat on the podcast. Because that's how grief is. I mean, you know, then you tell me, no, not that. I mean, so what else? You don't give offers of things that you can't give.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for getting to that.
I mean, it just drives me completely insane.
Exactly.
I never say that to anybody.
Exactly.
I know what you're going through. You have no idea what I'm going through. You can never have an idea. It was all different.
Wow.
All
I'm
you can
sorry
do
that
is
you're making it so
stand.
funny.
You know?
Yes.
Sometimes all you can do is just stand next to a person.
Yes.
They will tell you what they need. And if you can help, you help. Half the time you probably can't. That's just the way life is.
You know, empty promises, they stick. And I think I want to add on to that when someone is grieving and you come into their life, they're going to remember what you did for the rest of their life. Am I right, Mufaro? Is that your experience? That in that period, especially in the bereavement period immediately after the death, you almost, everything is sort of magnified to a certain degree. There are actions you never forget and words you never forget.
So, for example, when I lost my second brother, guy who is now probably one of my best friends, he's a guy who I kind of knew, but he availed his family to me when I went to the UK. And he was with me throughout. I was there for a week and a bit going through this process. He checked up on me continuously. He'd come to the place, to my brother's house where I was staying. And now he's like my best friend. I mean, he visited me from the UK a couple of weeks ago. But that experience with him, that shared pain, walked that journey in ways that I wish I could do for others. He didn't give me empty promises. He was just there.
Yes.
He would pour the whiskey for me when I was going through my alcoholism. He was just there.
Yeah.
If I was running out of whiskey, you just buy a whiskey.
Yeah. No, I don't take that for granted.
But it was simple. It was not complicated.
Exactly.
And so all of a sudden, he overtook people that I've shared life with for 30, 40 years and just became one of those guys who I can pick up the phone and just not just talk about pain. He's one of the few guys I can actually share my life with. You know, I can share with him my aspirations. You know, sometimes in our culture, I think for me, the tragedy of loss is that we're friends, but I don't always believe that our friends sometimes can handle what you aspire for. Or, you know, sometimes everybody thinks they're doing brilliantly, yet you think this is just the worst. I mean, I want to do much better. No, if you tell someone, I remember I had a conversation, that's when I stopped years ago with a friend. At the time I had, you know, in my head, I wanted to go to the top of the world, so to speak. But I looked like I was doing extremely well at the time. My friend couldn't understand. But my brothers could, because they knew me when I was at my most vulnerable. When you say things like, I want to be the president or something nonsense. You know? I mean, everybody has a right to dream big, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Of course.
So, I mean, those are real dreams when you dream and there's no possibility of success.
Yeah.
But anyway, but it does stick. I mean, going back to your question, it does stick.
Yes.
I mean, you create a friendship that is beyond, you know, things that when I deal with people who grieve around me, I try to be practical. I'm available, but I don't say how available I am, if that makes any sense.
I know.
I make myself available to them when there's conversation, when there is sometimes, as I said, sometimes you become a professional griever in that people think that because you've gone through something, you are able to process it better. Would practically ask me, but you know, you have gone through loss. How do I deal with this? And so what I've learned to do over time is to be able to be honest with people, you know, I will tell you as it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat things and tell you that, no, it will get better next week. So normally I just tell you what I'm going through. And the rest is for you to work out. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a counselor. I always say I'm just an engineer.
Very important. And I think it leads me to a question around any coping mechanisms.
Not anything that is useful to a human being. Not anything that I would advise anybody to do. I'm sure you've picked up in the conversation that the things that I do that are probably best left alone.
I know. I had an episode with a good friend of mine, and she said, "What do you mean besides vodka?"
Exactly. I've bought shares in a Scottish
whiskey company. Oh,
but I think when you talk about real practical things, as much as I've never really had counseling, but I've learned that by my opening up and being able to share when I can, and being vulnerable, I suppose that's why T knows about the story. I mean, I think I told you we're having a drink in Kenya or something on business, and just shared my story. She told me about you, but I'm always willing to just say it. I share my story. I think it's the only way I can cope with it, because it took away a lot from me. I would be a better human being without it. I'm sure of that. I was.
Yes. How, if in any way, would you say grief has changed you most significantly?
I was a happy chappy. Now I live for the, for the good days, because they're happy. Got a lovely family. I got 2 kids who I love to bits.
I appreciated when you said that you don't sugarcoat things. People need to know that grief is hard. And one of the best messages when I was grieving was a friend who said, grief is hard. And that was it. And I think that kind of honesty is very refreshing. Mufaro, you've managed, honestly, to bring out issues, which some of them we could have gone on more about, especially around masculinity and grief. Men need to grieve also, so that they don't, I'm not going to say become abusers, as if, unspent grief will automatically translate into violence. But there are many undesirable consequences of not living out your grief. And I want to thank you for living out your grief, because trust me, all that crying actually helps. If you were really keeping it pent up, it would affect the quality of your life and the quality of the lives of those around you.
All I can say is that if you're out there, you are dealing with grief, there are no formulas to these things. The reality is that it will linger for a long time. It also revisits. You have to allow it to allow the time for the vulnerability, because I think with that, what time does, it makes it a bit more infrequent. Most people, I think, we need counseling. I know I do. I just haven't had it. Sometimes the outward view may make it look like we are rocking it. We don't need any help. But I know that I'm better now. But I know a couple of years ago, I was completely depressed. I'm just lucky that I've kind of worked through it my own way, but not a good idea for most. And if you've seen suicide in your life, you realize, don't live like that. Grief is a habit of wanting to invite more grief. So if you're out there and you are feeling like I feel more half the time, get help.
Thank you so much for adding that, Mufaro. I have massive respect for you, for your journey, for the authenticity. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, despite just the fact of you made me laugh more than I think I should have. Thank you.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you for spending time on this episode of Granules of Grief with Refiloe. I do hope that you got even just a granule of what you need. You can find more information on the podcast on my social media profiles on Instagram at Refiloe and Refiloe on my Facebook page, as outlined in the description box. I hope to see you there too.